Today, again, the agenda is that let us talk a little bit about data mesh. Data mesh as a concept is getting a lot of traction, not from today, but for the last almost 2 years. I know that a lot of us, wherever we are talking to our enterprise clients, we have been talking a bit more about data lakes and data warehouses. But this is a concept that tries to invert that model. And again, for me to say that this is still a concept might be a false statement, because the likes of Google, the likes of AWS, they've already fleshed out how their cloud infrastructure is going to look like with the data mesh approach. So it is definitely more than a concept now, and certainly something that needs our attention as an organization that wants to look at emerging tech. So let us look at how does the current scenario. Let me see if I can hit full screen here. Okay, so let us talk about how does the current scenario look like. Now, in the current scenario, the way we see is that there are a lot of organizations who are investing in data lakes, data warehouses, and lake houses, as the new term is. So if you talk to, or if you hear any presentation from Databricks, now what Databricks says is that, oh, we have the Delta Lake, which is not a Delta Lake anymore, it's a lake house. So it's a culmination of warehouse as well as a data lake. So that is what people have been talking about. Now, what is the hope? The hope here is that we would be able to democratize data at scale. There's a lot of data, we should be able to make that available in order to have good customer experience based on hyper-personalization. That, yeah, we should be creating models, we should be creating our algorithms on the data lake so that we are able to personalize better, reducing operational costs, and then doing a trend analysis and business intelligence. Historically, how data lakes have been used so far is that data lakes have been used for building your AI machine learning models on that. So let's call it primarily machine learning models, further leading into AI, but that is what data lakes are currently getting used for. This is what we did for some of our clients as well. When we brought their data into a data lake, then built data marts on top of that so that that data can be passed on to their data science teams. And ultimately with data warehouses, we want to draw a lot of business intelligence. So that is historically what these concepts have been used for. Now let us look at how does the past to today look like. So there have been generations, right? Data warehouse, I don't know, Ram, you might remember when I was almost starting my career, or maybe a third or fourth year. This is like 98, 2002-ish time frame. I know a lot of you probably were not even born or were kids. At that time, there was a lot of focus on data warehouse. So the first generation was always data warehouses. That, okay, yeah, let us put all the data into a data warehouse. It had got a large number. It was expensive. Like when you're putting all the data into a data warehouse, it was expensive. And the bigger thing was that there was a larger technical debt which was encountered whenever anything was getting done on a data warehouse. Lots and lots of ETL jobs, unmaintainable. Even today, when we walk into some of our clients, they have got these ETL jobs that nobody knows how they run. Or there were huge amounts of file data that were being transferred from one place to another into FTP locations, into like whatnot. So that is how the data warehouses kind of evolved. And again, there was only a small group of specialized people who had the knowledge, and then they left, and then it was a mess. So again, case in point, some of our existing clients going through exactly the same journey. So that was the first generation when there was a lot of talk about data warehouses. Then there was a second generation that came in where we started talking a lot about data lakes. Now, data lakes, again, a lot of batch jobs that are running, again, being operated by centralized team of hyper-specialized people who understand that, okay, how do I move data from one place to another and finally deposit it in something that is a humongous volume of data. And the terminology that a lot of organizations have now started using is that these are not data lakes, these are data lake monsters, because we end up having so much data there. Essentially, what has been proven is that after a few quick wins, the central data team ends up becoming a bottleneck, because this is the central data team. Again, very similar to something that we are doing for one of our clients right now. On purpose, I'm not using the client names in this call because I don't know how we are going to share this. But one of the clients, they have got the central data team that is transferring all the data and just trying to make sure that we have all the data into that data lake. So this central team now becomes responsible for handling all the analytical queries. They become responsible for making sure that they are not only ingesting, they are actually curating data and they are preparing data, so that they can make it available to data science teams, they can make it available to other teams within the organization, and so on and so forth. So that is what the second generation of systems, which were data lakes, which probably came in, like maybe 6, 7, 8 years back. Since then, we have been talking about that, and frankly, this is something that we have been pitching to our clients as well. Oh yeah, like let's build a data lake for you. After that, we'll be doing analytics. The current generation, which is again a small sidestep from data lakes, is what we are currently doing for some of our clients as well, where we are using Apache Beam. One of our major clients using Apache Beam, in which we are trying to batch, harmonize the batch data as well as stream processing data coming together through Apache Beam, getting there deposited, or we are using Kappa for streaming data, or we are using cloud managed services for storage, machine learning models, and data pipeline execution. So that is how far we have come. Now, let us talk about what are the anything that you want to talk about here before I go ahead. First generation, second generation, and what we are doing right now. I think this would sync up pretty well for the team who has been working on one of our latest clients. But this is what we're doing. We are doing Apache Beam for them. Anyway, let us talk about some of the failure modes that we have seen so far. Now, the failure modes, the way they have been talked about in the industry are the following. One, that there is a lot of centralized and monolithic ecosystem that we end up building. How does that happen? So if you recall, now what we have started doing is that when we talk to our clients, we do talk about a lot of microservices. We go and tell them that, guys, you're like, why are you building a monolith? Let us build microservices. And this is how we are going to be defining your bounded context. This is how everything is going to be dependent together. But the same thing, we do not take it further to data. And that is what the data mesh concept talks about. What it talks about is that right now what we have been doing. So again, if you look at what we see here, this is what we are doing from a software development perspective. We are saying that, okay, we are going to decentralize the business into domains. We are going to put autonomous engineering teams. They'll be releasing their microservices, blah, blah. All this is excellent for software development. But none of this happens at the data side. So essentially what happens is that all the microservices, eventually, all the data that gets into something that we still call the data lake or a data warehouse. And from there, all the models are getting built, and there is a centralized team which is responsible for that. So we are ingesting from all corners, cleansing, enriching, transforming the data, and then this data then serves variety of needs, which could be any of these. It could be BI reporting, it could be machine learning models, it could be analytical insights or whatnot. But this is how we are doing it right now for many of our clients. And again, the reason we are having this discussion is to debate and understand whether that is the best way to do, or do we need to change our thinking as well, in terms of understanding that can we do it better from a data perspective as well. Because as an organization, as knowledge, when we go and pitch ourselves to the clients, this is what we're telling them, that guys, we are a data company. We understand data. We understand how to not only transform data or how to ingest data. We understand how to make that data available so that you can run your business better on that. So let us look at how do we do that. So this is centralized and monolithic, as we talked about. Then another thing is that the pipelines that are being generated right now, those are pretty standard pipelines. However, these pipelines are being done by specialized set of people. And by specialized set of people, what we mean is that this is the data team. Now, what the data team is responsible for is that through all the microservices, everything that you are doing, ultimately they'll ingest the data, they'll process the data, which is cleansing, enriching, whatnot, and they are the people who are responsible for serving the data to other upstream, downstream systems, and wherever it needs to go for machine learning and like analytics and whatnot. So essentially within these pipelines, now there are different teams assigned to different phases of the pipeline, slow delivery process. The biggest problem is that the people who are working with data, they are not the domain people as well. So these people, they understand, oh yeah, you're like, oh, I'll just pull up data from there. I'll cleanse it according to whatever you tell me to do, and I'm going to put it here so that I can serve it to you. They have almost, I won't say zero, but very less idea about the domain as such. And that is what is showing up when the data actually gets to this level of serving, where many people or many domains in the industry, what they are saying is that, hey, the data is just not accurate. Their data is not valid. We do not trust the data. The data is stale. Like I don't know what they're putting into the warehouse. And again, this is something that we have, not as being a smaller organization, but this is something that we have heard from most of our enterprise clients. I don't know if you have heard any other success stories coming in yet where we say that, oh yeah, like this is the data and this is how good we can do with the data, and this is what we really trust the data with. But as an organization, this is what we have seen, that again, slower delivery times, like the domains, they are not really happy about how the data is coming in, and they do not trust the data as much. I'll just pause there for anybody.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about a really successful data program. Who has an excellent data program that we can benchmark against among all our customers, right? I mean, if I see across the board, different customers ran into different issues.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the predominant theme across the board with all our customers is what you described, just now. I mean, that's the phase they are in.
Mm-hmm.
So they tried a data warehouse, and then they tried data marts, which is distributed model.
Right.
Now they moved to data lake, which is again centralized.
Mm-hmm.
Now I guess data mesh is taking back to the distributed model.
Yeah, in a way you are right. Yes. So again, like what struck me when I was reading through all of this is that we are talking about microservices, right? We are talking about business logic getting distributed. We are talking about bounded context. That, hey, like you as a order department, why do you even need to worry about like how the transportation of your order is getting handled? So that transportation, separate department, don't worry, you are order. So when that happens, and that is something that we very confidently say, because there is a lot of industry backing that, oh yeah, like we are working with the access and the boundaries of the organization, and this is how it is supposed to work. As soon as it comes to data, all that we are saying is that, push data to this, push data to that. And all the data finally gets into that swampy, dumpy lake where all this, like data swamp is present. And then who curates that data, who works on that data, that is a different team. Our job as a domain is that, I pass on all my order data to that, and I don't care about like that data anymore. So this is what we have been seeing a lot. And this is what data mesh talks about. So what they say is that data mesh, data lakes, data warehouses, they have just tremendously failed on their promise. And none of the organizations have been more than 20-25%, or that is the highest that they have got the return on investment on the after implementation of these data lakes and data warehouses. So ultimately, it is overall a big failure in terms of what we are trying to do with treating data as a monolith. Just like we do not want to treat our services or our product as a monolith, we should not be treating our data as a monolith as well. So going further, again, this is what it creates. It creates domain teams. The way we are working right now, it creates hyper-specialized data and ML platform engineers. These are the people who are doing this. And then there are consumers of data who just don't seem to be getting what they want. So essentially, this is what we see in all the organizations, and this is what a lot of enterprises are doing right now as well. So even a few days back, when we were talking about our cruising client, they are talking about a data team. So this is what the data team is doing. And I think we could just take this concept to them and just debate it a little with them as well as to how they want to make it successful. Anyway, the biggest challenge is that there is a high friction and cost of discovering, understanding, trusting, and using quality data. I think this is the biggest worry, because the quality of the data that ultimately we are getting after doing all of this is not that amazing the way we expected it to be. So this is how we are in the situation today, and this pretty much summarizes the current situation of where we are. Now let us talk about how do we make ourselves ready for the future. Now, the concept of data mesh, that talks about four underlying principles that should be followed. The first principle is that the domain, it should be decentralized. Just like our services are decentralized, just like our model is decentralized, our data should be decentralized. The data should be a product. Just like we say that there is a service that we are using and you call this API, this is what you get. So we should be defining our data as well, that, oh, if you need aggregation of all the orders for the last month, come and look here and I'll give you an API. So the way we expose it could be different, but that is what we need to do, that as a domain, we have a complete, or, like as a domain, if I'm the order domain, or if I'm the transportation domain, or if I'm the, if we are in the restaurant business, if I'm the, like serving domain, then we should be responsible for the kind of data that we are submitting back to the organization, or like to whomsoever it wants, who wants to consume. Then there should be a self-service infrastructure that is available, so that other domains, they can just go there, fetch the data, and be done with that. So we are not waiting for building, like data pipelines for them. It is not P2P. It is not point to point. They come in, they get the data that they want, and then they go away. And there is a federated computational governance, which I'll talk about a little more. But these are the 4 principles on which the data mesh strategy is built. Now, how does it look like? So this is how the data mesh strategy looks like. So there is domain ownership, there is data as a product, there is a self-service platform, and then there is federated governance. And this pretty much is what the data mesh philosophy talks about. We'll go into the details of each one of them, but what I want to showcase here is that the idea is that instead of flowing data into a central data lake, the domains need to host and serve their domain data in a consumable way. This is the central piece, that as a domain, I am responsible for making available my analytical data, and if required, my operational data, so that you as a different domain can use that. And I am an expert of my domain, so I know what is the kind of analysis and operational data that I can provide to you. I am custodian of that data. The data that I'm passing on to you, because I'm custodian, I'm owner of that data, you can trust me with this data. So that is the premise, that instead of me handing off this data to somebody who's curating that data, and I do not have any say about that, everything stays with me in my responsibility. Then I'll be making this data available as a product on a self-service platform, complying with the federated governance structure in the enterprise. So if the enterprise says that, okay, all our data needs to be available through Snowflake, that is an enterprise level decision that we can take. But within Snowflake, the data that I'm putting, I am custodian of that, so that, like, this is my area in Snowflake and I'm putting the data here. That is where the ownership lies. But the federated governance, that defines how we are going to make the data available across the enterprise. As it mentions here, the physical storage could be something like S3, or it could be, like whatever we decide on. It could be BigQuery, but the ownership stays with the domain who's generating that data. This is the centralized concept of data mesh, and then we can go into the details there. Any questions?
No, okay. I think one thing that that is definitely I agree with is one of the big issue in managing data is lack of domain expertise. I mean, with a lot of centralized teams, we see it across the board that we don't understand the data. Usually we run to some kind of business analyst asking questions. Hey, what does this flag mean?
Right.
So giving that back to the domain, I think, is definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
It will have a problem too, right? So you will need more people managing that. So if you talk about maybe just one place where all the data resides, but different ownership, so then different owners would be people who are maintaining it too. We could have something similar even in a data lake, where you add more technical analysts who are taking care of certain pieces of data within the same data lake. I think it's a similar concept.
Which is fine. Yeah. If that domain owns the data, so similar to what they mentioned here, that if it is domain oriented, decentralized, but the ownership is with the domain,
right?
That is still okay. That is at least a step ahead from where we are. See, right now where we are is that we just pass on data, and this is something that we have been doing as well. We just throw out data that, oh yeah, this is my domain. I'll emit events. the easiest way for us as microservices, what we do is, oh, we are going to emit events. You're like, don't worry, we are going to emit business events. We are going to throw that on your Kafka.
Yeah, and the reason why it happened, especially in the banks, because they wanted to get rid of some of their specialized folks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like retaining those resources to still have that ownership, which is, at least for the banks, this is what they wanted. Like, they wanted to get rid of that. You just have some product managers, very few developers, everything else goes to a central place, they don't have to worry about hiring new people, maintaining something. Right. But with this approach, we may come back to the same scenario and maybe more expensive.
Yeah, so this one, see, again, the problem with that approach, where centralized approach, was that the centralized approach people, they are mostly data experts. They are not product experts anymore. So from derivatives versus the trading platform versus the investments. You're like, I'm a data guy. You're like, come on, I'm just going to throw in the data. You tell me that, okay, instead of I have to mask this, I'll mask this flag. I have to do this, I'll do that. And you're like, then I just throw it into the lake. And then ultimately, you're like, so again, where this is coming from is that the people who are final consumers of that data, they do not trust this data anymore, which is lying in the lake, because they don't even know how it has been curated, how it has been maintained, what is the quality that has been ensured. And that is where this model is failing down, of making it central. But let us talk about, they also talk about how does the team structure look like as we go ahead. So we'll discuss and talk about that as well. So how does the data divide look like right now? The data divide is, so see, in any domain currently, in any domain, there is going to be operational data, right? And there is going to be analytical data. So these are the two kinds of data which are available in any domain, no matter what. Operational data is all the transactional data that comes in, which you're like, so if you're running a microservices, this keeps the current state, like whatever comes in. So for our, say, for example, for our leaderboard, all the transactional data, somebody writing a blog that comes in, getting scored, all of that is transactional data that comes in. Analytical data is the aggregated view of business facts or any, views that we want to drive on that, on any projections that we want to drive on that data. That is our analytical data. So these are the two concepts that we should understand for data, as to how do we divide data. Now, historically, what we were doing is that we were using all this operational data, putting it through the data pipeline, as we say, performing ETL on that, and then loading it into a data lake or a data warehouse on which all the optimization and blah, blah, everything was getting done. Now, so the idea was that, okay, if you put it into data lake, it is going to be supporting our data science access patterns. If you put it into a data warehouse, that is supporting our BI work. So all our business intelligence, that is something that goes into the data warehouse. So this is how the data divide was so far. Now, what we are doing with data mesh, or what we want to do with the data mesh, is that each domain is going to be responsible for its operational and analytical data. So far, if you see, the domain wasn't responsible for its analytical data. They just throw it out and they say, yeah, oh, go ahead and do whatever you want to do with that. But with the data mesh, each domain, they are going to be exposing both their operational and analytical data endpoints. So if there is a bounded context, which is a domain, it is going to be exposing its analytical data endpoint. It is also going to be exposing its operational data endpoint, that, okay, you as a consumer, go ahead and consume. You want to consume all my transactional data. This is how I'm going to give it to you. If you want analytical data, this is how I'm going to give it to you. And this is what it looks like. So essentially, what is going to happen from a domain perspective, if you look like, and maybe I'll zoom in a little more, is that this is how the data mesh architecture looks like. So if this is the domain, then all the operational data that gets ingested into analytical data within the domain, we drive our analytics on that, and we publish that as a data product. Now, when we publish that as a data product, there could be reasons for us to consume data from other domains, which will make our data product better. So where I have to marry and combine data from other domains, so that domain does come in. But essentially, using it from other domains, but this is the data product that we are exposing to the outside world from our domain. So if I'm the order domain, or if I'm transportation domain, I'll be exposing my data product to the outside world, and the consumers of this data product could be other domains, or it could be external applications or whomsoever. But the responsibility of data lies within the domain. Just like the business logic lies within the domain, so does the responsibility of the data. That is the concept here. Now, again, we operate under the federated governance guidelines, which are whatever is the security policy that we have to follow, what is the data format that we are following, what is a privacy compliance policy, etc. So those are the federated governance guidelines. But essentially, the domain is responsible for producing the data product that is going to be used by everybody else. And this data product then becomes available on the self-service data platform, on which there is, so again, the self-service data platform could be whatever you want it to be. You want it to be Snowflake, we'll throw our data product over there. But again, we are the custodian of the data. Through Snowflake, if you want to run our storage and queries on this data, go ahead and do that. Cataloging, access management, we'll do that. But so this is a self-service platform, but the data, responsibility of the data essentially is residing within the domain. That is the underlying concept here. Yes, sir. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, so the tools like BigQuery, Delta Lake, those are technology dimension, right? So the way today companies are implementing it is centralized data, like the way you just described. So it looks like data mesh is more of the governance model rather than design or technology layer.
Governance, I wouldn't just call it governance. I think it's a mindset shift in terms of what we are doing with the data in our domain. So if it is just governance, then we could just leave it here. We could still say that, oh yeah, just push all the data that you're getting into a data lake. And that could be a governance as well, that, this is a team that is taking care of that. But essentially what we are saying here is that you are responsible for the data of your domain. I think that is a mindset change. So far, the domains have been responsible for their operational data and not their analytical data. But what we are seeing now is that you are not only responsible for your operational data, you are responsible for your analytical data as well. And you have to expose that data as a data product following the governance guidelines, whatever we are laying down. You are going to be the custodian, maintainer, curator, enricher, whatnot of that data. And you are responsible for the quality of that data. And the ownership lies with you. So that is the mindset change. And then comes the data lake and like others. Data lakes and others, they come further ahead at the nodes of these of this infrastructure. So I don't know if I have that other diagram where, but essentially, maybe I as a domain want to create a data lake of my own. I could go ahead and do that. But all the data is not flowing into a data lake necessarily. That is the idea.
Yeah. So how the domain team is going to implement their analytical data and interfaces could be the same technology as domain 2 and domain 3, domain 4.
Could be. You're right.
Right?
It could be.
In fact, it should be, because you don't want to proliferate technology within the same company, because you need like self-serve data platform, right? Like each one of them shouldn't have to build their own infrastructure, their own platform, their own compliance policies.
You are right. So see, whatever needs to be done for me as a domain to produce this data product, that is up to me, right? Now, I should be able to publish this data product onto a self-serve model or self-serve platform. That is something that I need to be cognizant of. So I can say that I could be using, just like we say, like you are using microservices, go ahead and build it whatever. Like we are a polyglot system. Even on our internal product leaderboard, we just have it in Java, we have it in Kotlin, we have it in Scala. Like we don't care. But we have another service in Node. But as soon as we say that, okay, this has to be consumed on the same platform, then we are responsible for making sure that that data product can get into that platform. There is an interoperability, or there is a, it can fit into that. So if my data product that I'm creating does not fit into Snowflake, and Snowflake is something that we are using as a centralized self-service platform, then probably that is not good. So that is something that I as a domain have to be cognizant of. But apart from that, then within my boundary, I'm okay doing whatever I want to.
So if I look at, let's say there are 10 domains within the company, there are two issues I see. One, the skills required to build a good contract bound data exposure may not exist, or may be expensive to acquire in this day and age, where even centralized teams are struggling to find skills, talent, technology, etc.
Yeah.
The second is different domains may have different levels of pull and push. Like, for example, if I'm a customer facing domain, let's say, like, I don't know, if you take UKG, someone like HR, right? May have more need for data than benefits. So HR may want to invest heavily and work on this, and the other domain is not interested. They don't want to waste their time, and they would rather build their regular right? Like, how do you push all of them to invest in data? And is it practical to give ownership to individual teams and ask them to be at certain level? Because one thing that clearly comes to my mind is the biggest value in data is when you combine data from different areas.
Correct.
I remember UKG, the chief enterprise architect, mentioning the value of data exponentially grows when you can give users data from different areas, different domains.
For sure. See, value, absolutely. See, data within a domain, that is not going to be as interesting as once you start combining it with other domains, and that is where the value of the data is. So you are right on the fact that without a federated governance, and that is why like the underlying principle is about federated governance, this model is not going to work. The problem that we are trying to solve here is that instead of the domains washing their hands, saying that, oh, we hit that data into the Kafka topic, my work is done, it needs to come back that you are responsible for your data. Other things about the federated model, where we are talking about that, okay, from this domain, we do need this kind of analytical data, and somebody pushes for that data. I agree with the fact that maybe I do not want to consume any other data. I'm just producing my data, operational data. You go ahead and do whatever you want to do with that. Yes, a domain could take that view, but that is where that federated governance comes in, because eventually your data is important for this other domain, other bounded context, and this is where it is of value. So you are responsible for that as well. So point taken again, and this is something that has been growing in popularity. And as I said, we as an emerging tech organization, we need to be on the cusp of that. But this is something that, yes, these are the organizational boundary changes that will need to happen, and there are going to be debates on this, and how do we do that? Let us look at a little further as to what I'll be responsible for as a domain. So just like as a domain, currently we are responsible for making sure that our APIs are discoverable, right? They are understandable. The documentation does exist. API sandboxes are there. The KPIs are defined. Similar things need to be done for the data as well. Our data, it needs to be discoverable. It needs to be addressable. It needs to be describable. It needs to be interoperable. It needs to be secure. This is something that we as a domain are responsible for. Very similar to the microservices concept, guys. You are responsible for this. You are responsible for your service cataloging. You are responsible for your service discovery. This is something that you do for your data as well. All the things like data provenance, lineage, trustworthiness, the domain is responsible for that. Now comes the fact that how do we do it within a team? So again, the idea is that apart from business functionality engineers, which we know how we actually give them, there needs to be a data product owner and data engineers on the team who will be responsible for building this model. They'll be responsible for making sure that they are harvesting and extracting infrastructure goes into the infrastructure. So there are two parts to it. One part is that, and I have that diagram somewhere, I'll come to that probably in summary, but we do not want to build the data infrastructure. So that could be a separate team. Therefore, Snowflake, somebody's doing that. Like somebody's maintaining Snowflake. But as a domain, I am responsible for the data that we are curating. And for that, the teams, apart from the business engineers, they are going to be requiring a data owner, data product owner and data engineer. That is the recommendation. And then there is going to be a shared data infra team, which already is there. So it could be the DevOps team, it could be the team who's maintaining and keeping this infrastructure up and running. But this is how the cross-functional team needs to be built, apart from whatever business functionality engineers that we have right now. So right now, whenever we go to a client, we tell them that, oh, we come in as a pod, and this is what the pod is going to look to you like. We are going to come with a scrum master, we are going to have, like a tech lead, we are going to have senior consultants, we are going to have consultants, and that is what the pod looks like. But then we also have to start telling them that there is going to be a data engineer on the team who will be responsible for this. There is going to be a data product owner. Again, we'll see how we sell that. But this is the philosophy. And I think I'll have the diagram here and we'll talk a little more about it. So again, if you look at what is the manifesto that we are driving towards, the manifesto is that we want to be serving data than just ingesting data. So far we have been ingesting data that, oh yeah, like I just ingested it there. We want to be making sure that we are discovering and using over extracting and loading. So just like they have the Agile Manifesto, do this instead of that. We want to be publishing events as streams, overflowing data around into centralized pipelines. So yeah, publishing events into streams, but then doing analytics on top of that. And we want to be building ecosystem of data products over centralized data platform. So this is the manifesto. And Ram, to your point, the way you were saying that eventually, yes, there are going to be this global governance and open standards, which will allow us to enable interoperability. The domain data will be owned by this cross-functional team that we talked about. And if you look at all these three ingestion, curation and serving, this is going to be done within the domains. So this is not ETL jobs, the extract, transform, load. They do not run outside the domain, they run within the domain. And then these domains, they can be talking to each other. They can be extracting data from each other. There is going to be a data infra team, which is going to be laying down certain pieces of infrastructure, like Kafka, for example. They'll be laying down Spark, for example. They'll be laying down any other thing which is required for these teams to carry out their ETL within their domain. So this is what the data infra engineers do, but then the domains, essentially, they are responsible for doing what they are doing. Again, under the governance of federated governance, so that or at least all of this data that is being produced as data products, this is interoperable. So let us look at how does the emergence of mesh now look like. Now, if you look at, this is how Ram, and as you correctly said, eventually the data only becomes valuable when there are multiple teams who can start pulling data. So essentially what they divide the data into is that there are going to be domains which are going to be source aligned. That means that they are sources of data. There are domains which are going to be aggregators, which will aggregate data from various sources. And there are domains which are going to be consumer aligned, where there could be, say, marketing teams, control groups, compliance groups, which are going to be consumers of data. They're not producing any data. They are more like BIs, they are marketing, they are analytics, which will be, like further drawing on this data. But all these individual domains, say checkout domain in this case, or fulfillment or payment or this, they are responsible for their own data products, and they are responsible for making sure that they release their data products according to the guidelines which we talked about. Not only operational data, but also the curated analytical data. And then all this data gets mashed up together. But within a team, they are responsible for the data. So again, just to zoom out. So just like so there are going to be source domains, there are going to be consumer domains. So source domain, they pretty much are all the facts of business. So all the transactional data that we are running, that is source domain. Payments that we are making, orders that we are booking, all of that is source domain. These can be stored as business events. These can be aggregated. So source aligned data sets are separate from OLTP data sets that run the business. So this is analytical data that we produce on our OLTP data sets so that they can be presented. And again, the analytical data, that is not immutable. These are facts of business that have already occurred. So the analysis is prepared on that. And then probably I'm repeating the same thing here, that instead of doing it separately, just every domain is responsible for their data. They are responsible for their quality of data, be it timeliness, error rates, etc. But this is how then the data mesh emerges eventually once all the domains, they start producing their own data.
A question here, the emergence, can it borrow the data from outside of the organization?
If it is relevant, again, if it is relevant for that domain, say for example, when we work with a cruising client, right? I know that we borrow data for one of our services, the weather data from authoritative weather API. Ram, I don't know if you recall, but that is something that we borrow from that particular service, but then it becomes a part of our domain, which is that ship cruising domain that we talk about, that when we are further ahead, 12 hours into our journey, this is what the weather is going to look like, on the basis of which we have made the decision to steer the ship with certain speed into a certain direction. But that data comes from an external domain, it becomes a part of our domain, and on the basis of that, we use it. So I believe I haven't encountered this as a part of the research that I'm doing so far, but I believe that should be true, Narayan.
Yeah, and the very right example. I was looking very small example of getting the supply chain data, because today it is not connected. My organization will have my supply chain, but if I'm getting it from my vendor,
right,
that will not be connected. So I was looking from that. But you have very right example. And similar.
Right, and I think you can. So I know that you and Ram, you are much more experts on supply chain, so you can bring in your comments as well as to how this fits into that world. But yeah, that is the one example that I could think of immediately. So now let us talk about the implementation part. From an implementation perspective, how does it look like? Let us kill all these. So from an implementation perspective, how does the domain team's journey look like? So I know that I'm the product domain. How does my journey look like from an implementation perspective? So let us go here. So essentially, this is what the domain team's journey looks like when we look at it. So right now, again, from a level 0 perspective, you will see that there is zero data analytics. From a level 1 perspective, we just have operational database queries. That is all the operational data, all the transactional data that happens in the system. Level 2 is that we analyze our own data, analyze cross-domain data, something similar to what Narayan was saying, but this is internal. And then we publish data as a product. So this is how the team's journey goes. That right now, many of our clients, I would believe, we are either at level 1 or maybe some clients at level 2 where they're analyzing their own data, but nobody is publishing their own data as a product. I don't think that the domains are really analyzing the cross-domain data as a input to the product that we want to release as a domain product. So this is what we have to probably start talking to our clients once we get more conversant with the terminology here. That guys, you are at this stage, but probably we want to start publishing your data as a product, and this is where we want to go. And this diagram, I think pretty much we've already covered, so I will skip this. This is pretty much like just working with other domains and getting the data in. But this is the domain team's journey. And then the data team's journey, so far, if you notice, this is how the data teams have been working. So there is a centralized data team, the domains exist independently, and that is how the world is today, right? If at all like this, for many clients, probably this also does not exist. Now the idea is that we move from here to here, where we are saying that now, okay, this is the domain team. The new domain team, this is going to be responsible not only for, so there is no centralized data team. The domain team is responsible for data, its analytics, and producing data as a product. There is going to be an infra team, the data infra team, which is going to be making sure that everything is available. Like if Kafka needs to be laid down, that Kafka is available. If Snowflake needs to be there, Snowflake is available. And then the idea is that earlier the central team had got the data engineer, But now the domain team is going to be having the data engineer along with the product owner and the domain. So within the domain team, the data engineer does exist, who's responsible for producing that data product. So this is how the team structure changes according to the data mesh philosophy. And again, we could argue about the fact that, yeah, like there are not enough talent available. Even the central teams are not getting enough people. Yeah, probably those are practical constraints. But the idea is that this is how it should be. Every domain is responsible for their data, and that is the crux of the matter. Now, let us look at how organizations or how the clouds, they have already started talking about this. So I've just taken the example of GCP because I know that we end up using GCP for quite a few of our clients, and this probably will make more sense. But exactly similar philosophy adopted by Azure, exactly similar philosophy adopted by AWS. You could just replace component by component and you'll see it's exactly the same. And they have been heavily talking about this now. So this is what Google says that, okay, like if you want to build a data mesh, and you should, they say, build a data mesh on us, and this is how it is going to look like. So build a data mesh within the domain. Again, this is the domain boundary. Do your operational data, using Kafka PubSub or Google PubSub, ingest the data into analytics, which is the analytical part within the domain. Use data from BigQuery, whatever you want to do for that. And bring in data from other domains using Data Studio or whatnot. Build your data product using BigQuery views, your data catalog, your custom, bring your own custom SQL test, whatever. But this is how you can be building your data product. And from a self-service platform perspective, there is going to be a data catalog, there is access management, there is, platform operations, which is available to you. But this is what you can do within GCP So essentially, if you look at it, Ram, if the other day when we were talking about BigQuery, so essentially the data product is a view on my data set within BigQuery. This is my portion, and I am the custodian of that. I'm responsible for the data there, and I'm responsible for the upkeep, trustworthiness, quality, whatnot of the data here. And again, if you notice, so I've just included a link here. If you go to this link, this is white paper that they published February of 2022. Google releases a white paper that build a modern distributed data mesh with Google Cloud. Amazon is doing exactly the same. Azure is doing exactly the same. That guys, this is how you can go ahead and build your data mesh, because this is what everybody is now talking about, that the data ownership and the responsibility of data, that is very important, and it has been messed up with data lakes and data warehouses. You need to be building your data mesh, and then they, so whatever we have tried to cover here in brief, this diagram, they just talk about that in detail in how do we do that when we use BigQuery and how we can go ahead and build a data mesh on that. So pretty credible from that perspective. So I'll just pause there, and of course, we can go in and read the white paper. I just wanted to hear any other questions, thoughts, feedback, anything else that you think that we should be exploring, or how should we be pitching this better to our clients, and then we take it from there.
I was just thinking 2 points. One is, if I am owning my data, I am analyzing, I am building it as a product.
Yeah.
But as soon as we say product, I have to see that there has to be someone as a customer to it. Yeah. Of course, within the organization, there will be people as other domains as a customer, but then their need has to be understood. So
yes,
team will always end up going to be a cross-functional. It is not going to restrict only to the one domain.
Which is probably correct, Narayan. Yeah, I think you make a good point. So say if the order team that needs certain kind of analytics coming from me, so yes, they are going to make that requisition to me. But the idea is that I am responsible for getting that analytical data to them, since it is coming from my domain. I think that is the summary. But yeah, what you're saying is correct. That eventually, yes, the teams would have to work together, and only then the beauty of the data comes out. But the main point is that whatever they are asking me, I am custodian of that data, and I'm responsible for producing that data into my data product so that they can consume it.
This federated governance model, will be having some feature like this, which will enforce this discipline or the consumer producer relationship?
So from a tooling perspective, you mean that, say, for example, if I'm a separate domain, I can make a request and then somebody else gets that request? Are you talking about from a tooling perspective, or?
No, I will.
Yeah, so data formats and everything that'll be defined at the federated level. So that is something that will happen. But I think Narayan is asking about whether the federated governance is going to make that happen. So I think so if you look at this, the federated government, it is going to enable the interoperability. It is going to enable what are the formats, what are the structures that need to be used. But I don't know if there is going to be a tooling for that. It is something that will be defined at the architecture office level that, oh guys, as an enterprise, this is how we'll be using our data. This is the structure that we have to follow, and this is where the data products have to be deposited. But within domains, for a domain to ask for a certain kind of data to another domain, I think that kind of conversation will still need to happen. With federated governance, probably it just becomes easier. I don't know if there is a tool that can support that, but that communication would need to happen for sure.
Yeah.
Could be that, or it could be, like what I read somewhere else is that it is just like a tag, technical architecture group, or as you go into some enterprises, we find some places called architecture office. So it is going to be probably that. I think I'll have to read up a little more as to see. This is, again, a lot of this is easier said than done. Like federated governance, it is going to be complex. Whenever we go to any organization, even getting for us into that microservices category of defining a bounded context, that was tough, right? And then we needed to lock horns with the architecture office about various things that, hey, why not this, and why this? So that is going to be tough. But anything that you might want to take away from today's conversation is going to be the fact that two things. One, earlier when we were as a domain throwing out data to somebody else, that is not going to happen. As a domain, we are going to be responsible for the ETL of our data as well. Earlier, we were just throwing out our operational data, not worrying about the analytical data. But as a domain, in the data mesh, we are going to be responsible for the analytical data as well. And as a domain, we are going to be responsible for the ETL of data within the domain. So these three things that you see here, this is ETL, right? So we are going to be responsible for this and responsible for producing our own data product that will be held accountable for. That whatever data that we are throwing out, that is trustworthy. That is the takeaway, biggest takeaway for me, because so far we have not been worrying about that at all. What we have been worrying about is the fact that, okay, yeah, let us just do our business journeys, and we are done with that. We are pretty much in this current scenario state right now, where we just talk about our wherever we had the diagram. I'll have to hunt it now. But wherever we created this particular block, that yes, don't worry, we'll be creating an excellent microservice for you, but don't talk to us about data. I think that needs to change. So this particular concept, I think this is the biggest takeaway for me so far. And then we'll have to get deeper into the how part as to how these things happen. There is going to be BigQuery, but within that BigQuery, how does this view of BigQuery, which is going to be my data product, become only accessible to me? What is the authorization, authentication that we can put on that, so that only I am responsible for updating that, and I am responsible for its upkeep as well. And then there are others who can start consuming out of that.
So one question, Vikas. So how does Noldes gain this kind of capability, and how do we help the clients as a consulting company?
Yeah, I think Yasser, if you think about it, I think we are kind of there. I think what we need to start understanding is that we are doing this part, right? We are doing this part of BigQuery. We are throwing the data into BigQuery already for multiple of our clients.
Yeah.
What we are not doing right now is that we end our story over here. We say that, oh yeah, it is in BigQuery. Our work is done. Oh yeah, we as a engineering team, we have delivered it. That is data landing for us. I think what we are not doing is that we are not talking to them about the data product. We are not talking to them about the fact that, okay, yeah, say we have thrown in all the forms data. What is the data product that we can build out of that, which could be a view to you? And this is something that we'll be maintaining as a domain. This is where I think that we have to start having our conversations as well. And then we have to start telling our clients that, guys, this is where the world is moving, where it is actually moving. So, as I showed you, this paper is as of February 2022. This is like hot new, and this is how it is going to happen. So, and all the clouds are doing that. I think we need to be on the forefront of telling our clients that, guys, this is something that we understand. You have to start looking at domains, not only from a microservices perspective, we have to start looking at domains from a data perspective as well. And then we start getting into this territory of publishing our data products. I think that is going to be a win for us. Now, how do these data products connect to others and this and that? I think that is going to be a second step. But the first step is going to be that let us start considering data as a first-class citizen as well in the domain and not just the business logic, which we are already doing.
Yeah, I think it's more like we can tell them that this is a new concept that may help you, data mesh, but even like why they would say why Noldes can do it and why not us, like whatever we have so far. Because I'm talking about the expertise we can build, and we can say, okay, why a customer or client cannot do it, and why Noldes is better equipped.
I think, I would say that even if a customer would say that we'll do it, I just say, yeah, absolutely, go ahead and do it. See, I think what we have done, Yasser, is that when we bring out modern ideas to our customers, which are future-ready ideas, we get credibility no matter what. So even if today they tell us, oh yeah, we'll have a team that will do it. Excellent, go ahead and do it. At least they'll recognize us for the fact that you brought it to our attention, and I think that is a win. Many a times, what is also going to happen is that once they understand that, okay, this is what Noldes knows, they are already experts on emerging tech. Let us do this work with them as well, and that is how we have worked in all our. So, say for example, Scala. We always heard that, oh yeah, we'll get our engineers to do it, but then how many of them put in the effort and energy to actually go ahead and start building that kind of ecosystem? Eventually, if we as Noldes, we understand the concept and we understand this part as to how to do it with GCP, I think we are already miles ahead for many of our customers. And many other organizations will start coming in and even start talking about this. So I think from that perspective, there is never going to be an easy answer as to why only Noldes can do that. But
no, not why only Noldes. More about why vendor is needed. Like a vendor is definitely needed to have, like, not definitely, but yeah, more likely to have something put on GCP, have that whole infrastructure ready.
Right.
Even the concept of making it as a product, that also a consulting company can help. What I'm talking about, like, is there any competency Noldes has to build to show that?
I think we do. Oh yeah, for sure. I think we do. Yeah, sir. I think we do. So everything that we have been talking about. So I've started reading about data mesh almost for the last month or so because I see that increasing in value. And I think what we have to do as Noldes is that we have to understand how do we do it with GCP to start with? How do we do it with AWS? Because every cloud is giving a white paper on how to do it with them. And again, I refer to GCP, I refer to AWS, and pretty competing. Whatever we are saying that we can do on BigQuery, they say, oh, this is the abstraction that we have given you on S3. Go ahead and do it. So everybody is talking about that. I think we as Noldes, what we have to do is that if we understand the what and then the how, I think that is good. And then we start talking about that. So because this is a lingo that will get used more often than not. And if we are on top of that, then we are talking to our clients at that level where we can, where they can start thinking about us that as an organization that can make an impact.
So because I think, with the customer that I'm currently working, this is exactly what has happened, right? And we actually kind of struggled and said that the product is not what we want to do. This is something that you should take care, because this is more domain and business. And we kind of stepped out. Narayan knows it well. They were actually asking us to build the product, and we are like, hey, that's your business. You should take care, right? I think had I come across this concept that, conceptually, because end of the day, the value is in the data product. I know the money and complexity is on the engineering ops, but the customers see the business value from the product.
That is true.
So Yasser, to your question, we are much more mature and capable to implement this. It is just that we don't have that business product view, and all we need to do is acquire that domain and product building knowledge. So we need to offer to our customers that we not only do the engineering part, but we can also actually bring the data product part as well. So that is one. Second point is I could see, may not be today, but very quickly large organizations, if they are successful in building this even moderately, the importance of data ops is going to go up exponentially. Because if you are building a monolith, a centralized team, you could somehow, ignore the operations part of how you deploy, like the customer that you are working on, right? So you are looking at it as an automation post facto, but ability to design it from the get-go and making sure ops work every step of the way, because you're not doing one monolith for the entire company. You have to replicate that for multiple domains. That means you need to have the ops design well laid out so that you can do the same thing and reduce the chaos that ensues if you don't, like the customer that you are working on, right? Like right now, they don't have good data ops. That's why they are doing so many manual tasks. So I think that is second area that we should seriously, get deeper and invested in. Look at the tool set for data ops, and second is acquire domain and product building knowledge.
Yeah, I think domain, Ram, if you recall, we always talk about that for us to make it an Aldous-owned project, we need to really understand the domain. I did not know how far we ran away from, getting into the domain of the customer that you were talking about. But that is always going to lead to success. Once we understand the customer business, once we understand the domain well, I think that just makes it so much better. Not only from a decision, because right now I think we just went and we built up a data pipeline, we landed the data, and that was the end of the story. But once we start telling them that this is what you can do with data, this is how we can own the data, this is how we can, so the things that we talked about here, that just gives them a confidence as well that, okay, yeah, they are thinking for business success. And this is going to lead to business success, supposedly, what we have not been seeing with the lakes and warehouses and lake houses. So again, we'll see where this matures. Even the data lake was supposed to be the silver bullet. But I found it interesting, at least in sync with our philosophy of decentralization and microservices and bounded context. The biggest argument that they give is that, Eric Evans, we have been talking about his book, Domain-Driven Design. We have been talking about bounded context. But why don't we do it with data? Why just with business logic? And I think that does sound interesting.